Okay, family, I'm trying to keep this as brief as I can. Um, Normally, when we have events of the sort that we've had over the past couple of weeks, I will write a statement. I have some level of confidence in my ability to convey what I'm thinking in written form. But I decided that this time it's best for me to do it as a video, and I'm doing it for a couple of reasons. Number one, I've noticed that whenever I write something out, especially if it's a little long, um, the group whom I call the Google search theologians will come around and try to critique a secondary, tertiary point in that statement, and I just didn't have time for that today. The other thing is I've noticed that sometimes people will be critical of the perspective without any regard for the sentiment or the feelings of those who are mourning the circumstances. So I decided it's best for me to try to get you to see where I'm coming from by doing it in a video format instead of in a written form. If you can imagine, as you can imagine, I was reluctant to do that because I haven't had a haircut in 3 months because of quarantine, and so I have a face for radio right now. But the thing I want to be mindful of is the seriousness of what we're dealing with here, and I don't want anyone to take it lightly. So I need you to hear me and see me while we are addressing it. The other thing is I'm just too tired to write about it. I'm too tired, but I refuse to allow a man to die in the manner in which he died without both memorializing the life that we lost and addressing the manner in which we lost him. So there you go. That's my video. So I want to give you some context here with what I'm dealing with. So on Monday, I'm getting ready to leave the house, and my wife brings to my attention a video of a man who was in, I believe it was Central Park, a remote part of Central Park, and he's bird watching a black man in his 50s. And he is, the video starts with him in the middle of an encounter with a white woman, and she does not approve of him recording the encounter, which was the smartest thing he could have done. And she says something that should have caught everyone's attention if they're paying attention, and that is she's about to call the police, and she tells him, before she dials the number, she tells him what she's about to do. And she said, I'm going to tell them that I'm being attacked by an African-American man. Why it was necessary to do that should jump out at everyone. That lets me know that she knows the significance of mentioning that it's an African-American man. She did that before she even made the phone call. But frankly, that's even a secondary horror. The thing she did that caught my attention most is, upon making the phone call, the tone of her voice changed. So she gave the distinct impression to the person who's on the other side of that phone call. She gave a very distinct impression that she is in distress, that she is under attack. She's mentioning more than once, she mentioned it's an African-American man, and she gave the tone and emotional urgency that comes with being in distress. She was weaponizing the police against him. And it's not because he had actually assaulted her. In fact, at one point, while he's recording the encounter, he says to her, do not get close to me. Stay away from me. He says that to her. But on the video, on the phone call, she gives the impression that he is a threat to her. She knows what she's doing. So the thing I can't help but notice is how consistently everyone will tell me that black people are crazy. They'll write off the fact that that systemically black men are seen in a certain way. They'll write that off. But apparently she knows, because she let him know before she even did it. She's aware of the significance of what she's about to do. And then she went into character to convey the type of urgency that comes with the words. She didn't just say a black man, but she sounded like a black man. There's a certain eeriness to the fact that this is occurring where it did, because something very similar happened to Central Park 5 or the Exonerated 5. And they had to defend themselves against an accusation, and then the entire time they're They were innocent, and they were proven innocent after years of incarceration. I'm saying to you that that's no small thing, and I intended to address that. But then on the same day, another event in a different city, a man is choked to death by having the knee of another man on his neck. And you're thinking, this one was recorded. How will people respond to this? And the statement that was made was he resisted arrest, and he was under arrest because of being a forgery in progress and that kind of thing. But the thing I can't help but notice in the video, we didn't see the beginning of it, but here's what I noticed in the video. And for those of you who are going to try to bring his past or even the events of earlier that day to my attention, I want to point something out to you. In the video, which was 10 minutes long, 8 of which had a knee on the back of his neck, that entire 8 minutes, he was handcuffed. He was handcuffed. If he slapped someone prior to that moment and then gets handcuffed and is taken to the ground, a knee on the back of his neck for 8 minutes, that's not justice, that's vengeance. And here's the facts. We now have a video that occurred that was released, that occurred prior to that moment, and we now know that much of that resisting arrest statement that came from the police is not founded. He was compliant while handcuffed, minutes before taking to the ground and having a knee to the back of his neck. And the thing that everyone should have taken note of is on 2 occasions he called for his mother. A 46-year-old man was so aware of his imminent death that he called out for his mother, who wasn't present. And he repeatedly said, "I cannot breathe." And you have witnesses who gathered there on the sidewalk who are pleading for his well-being, pleading on his behalf, pointing out that his nose is bleeding. And then at about the halfway point, pointing out that he is not moving and appears to be unconscious. And in spite of hearing that, the police officer's knee remained on his neck for another 3 or 4 minutes. And I mention that to you because I empathize not just with him, but with the people who were on the sidewalk pleading for his life. How powerless must you be to be appealing to law enforcement to save a life while watching them take it? Now, I know I'm going to get these emails, bad apples, and not all law enforcement is bad. There's no profession in the world where everyone is bad. I know that. But the bad apples thing should carry everyone's attention, because you can have a cultural structure in place. If the bad apples are present, then complete the entire saying, because the bad apples ruin a batch. And I mention it to you because while one man had his knee on the neck, there were 3 men who didn't stop him. One man on video was holding the crowd back. The powerlessness of not only watching it happen at the knee of one man, but being held back by 3 others. That's the observation being made by black people as they watch that video. Now, I mention that to you because 8, 9, 10 days ago, I issued a statement regarding the death of Ahmaud Arbery, and the thing that caught my attention was the backlash I received because of my statement. And the thing that troubled me was the ones who challenged me on it, on the fact that I wasn't waiting for the trial, and the fact that I wasn't making statements that appeared to find them guilty in advance. I'm not referring to what happens in the future. I wasn't talking about the trial. I was talking about the fact that they shot an unarmed man in the middle of the street. And 2.5 months went by. They didn't even go to jail that day. And then after being questioned, were sent home. They were never even arrested. I know this for a fact. If I shot an unarmed man who's trying to assault me, I'm going to, at the very least, find myself in a courtroom. They were not even arrested. And the first district attorney handled it in the most irresponsible manner possible, then passes it on to the second district attorney, who somehow managed to match her lack of responsibility. And then he makes a statement saying that the shooting was completely legal, which ruins the jury pool. It completely taints the jury pool that potentially will be in place for a trial. Then he passes it on to a third district attorney, who passed that buck on to a grand jury. And I'm telling you that black people in that community looked at that and said, not only do we take note of what happened here in the street, but we look at the brokenness, the one-sidedness, the racism of the system. That's the position I was taking in my statement regarding Ahmaud Arbery. And then people decided to write open letters mentioning me by name, and then having the temerity to tag me on it so they'll end up on my Facebook page because they want me to know about this open letter, in which they challenged me on my genuine belief, my defensible belief, that where the gospel is, justice is also. So if someone remains silent, my contention is that they're preaching a different gospel. Now, I got pushback on that because of a gross misrepresentation of what I'm saying. They're telling me that I'm arguing that social justice and the gospel are the same thing. I've never said that. I couldn't say that because I don't believe it. But I will say that the excellent life, death, burial, and resurrection of Christ not only saved us for eternity, but it delivers us from the brokenness of time. He did not really die so that you could experience eternal bliss. He died so that everything that is broken can be made whole. And if your gospel message does not apply the gospel to all brokenness, if it is specific to justification, our deliverance from sin, and our eternity with him, if that's all it's focused on, then you are so heavenly minded that you are of no earthly good. The temerity to sit back and tell people who are enduring the hardships, the hell of time, the hell here on earth, and say, just wait, it'll get better. While you yourself are not having to endure that, you're telling them to wait. The arrogance of that is you abdicating a comprehensive gospel message. One of the arguments was that we live in two kingdoms. We live under two kingdoms. One is the earthly government kingdom, and the other is the eternal kingdom over which Christ reigns. That's entirely unbiblical. It's not even close to Bible. Throughout history, that doctrine has been used to oppress people. It's the thing that resulted in Martin Luther's co-signing of the death of peasants under the tyrannical hands of the princes in the 16th century. It's also the doctrine that Nazis used in Nazi Germany, and why the church decided to stay out of the abuses of the state, because they're recognizing the state as one government and Christ's kingdom as another, and they don't want the two to mix. Here's the problem with that. After his resurrection, Christ gathered with his disciples, and in one parting statement to them called the Great Commission, he says, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given unto me. I'm not just king there, I'm king here. And he said, in light of that, go and make disciples. You are to replicate the kingdom agenda here. Because while my kingdom has not been consummated, he hasn't returned for a consummation of his kingdom, it has been inaugurated. We're not waiting on a king. We have one. And he's not the king somewhere, he's the king everywhere. And that king values justice. And he purchased it on the cross. If your understanding of the cross is simply that Christ died so I can go to heaven, then you are not applying the cross to your marriage. You're not applying to your cross to the broken schools in your community. You're not applying the cross to the broken relationships and the violence that may exist in your community. You're not applying it to those matters, then you're truncating the gospel. In Ephesians chapter 2, verses 1 through 10, he says that Christ died. Paul says Christ died to reconcile us to God. And then verses 11 through 22, he says that same death reconciled us to one another. One death had both vertical and horizontal reconciliation. There's more than one fruit of the gospel. The life, death, burial, and resurrection of Christ did not justify us, it sanctified us. It has characteristics, it has indicatives, and it also has imperatives that come out of those indicatives. You can't take that lightly. So to stand up and say that we should be quiet when injustice is made manifest right in front of us, video, to say nothing is an abdication of the gospel. It is reductionism. It is truncating the gospel message to something less than what it is. It's also focusing on that which you value, and it's at the expense of what everyone else needs. If the marginalized need the gospel pursuit of justice, then how dare you say that it is not a real thing? It is a very real thing. You only say it's not real because you've never found yourself under a man's knee, pleading for your life and calling for your mother. Now, here's the thing I'm dealing with right now. I don't expect much from the world. The world doesn't know any better. But the church will either sit quietly when this happens, or when they do speak up, is to critique those who have spoken up against it. And you wonder why black and brown people are packing their bags and leaving evangelicalism in droves. In this past week, I've had a conversation with a friend of mine who brought up the fact that black people are leaving evangelicalism. And he says to me, Brandon, you're the one who has to go get them. And I said, they didn't leave me. The thing that made them leave are common ground. The things that made them leave, they're common ground for us. They left because of vocal displays and disregards for injustice that comes from the church. They didn't hear that from me. They heard that from you. When it's time to go get them, you send me. So you run them off, but you won't go get them. And the response to that was, you go get them because they're your people. And I said, that's the problem. You don't see them as yours. But the imperative to love your neighbor as yourself, it compels you to see those who are leaving as yours. And at the very least, you should self-assess and ask, where was I silent, or where was I inappropriately vocal? When did those things occur and prompted their departure? The church is supposed to be the front runner in opposing acts of injustice. We're the only ones with a gospel message that makes a pursuit of justice a livable, viable thing. We're supposed to be the front runner in opposing injustice. For you to sit quietly after seeing a man die slowly. They did not have enough mercy to kill him quickly. They killed him slowly and left a mark that will never be erased on the hearts and minds of every person who was gathered on that sidewalk and watched it happen and pled for his life. And for every person who watched that video and identifies with him, it's an indelible mark. It will never be erased. And it is the responsibility of the church to bring the gospel to bear on that brokenness. So miss me with your message about getting people into heaven. To be so heavenly minded and no earthly good is an entirely inconsistent preaching of the gospel. I'm not trying to hear it anymore. You have no idea how done I am. I'm experiencing a genuine crisis of faith. My orthodoxy is solid. It's solid. I am doctrinally within the evangelical camp. But the thing I'm noticing as I get older is that my siblings who are white, who share my orthodoxy, have a fundamentally different orthopraxy. The means by which they work out our doctrine is not only different from mine, but it's indifferent. It is indifferent to my circumstances. And if that's what it is, then we're not preaching the same message. And if that requires my exit, then I'll pack my bags and bounce. Because I'm done. I'm tired of being tired. I'm tired of saying something only to have voiceless men decide to speak up in critique of me having said something. Instead of joining me, they oppose me, and they become the clergyman in Alabama who told Martin Luther King that he should just wait because God will fix it all in the end. And to that, my response is, you are of such heavenly mindedness that you are of no earthly good. That's not how the kingdom works. He said all authority in heaven and on earth is his now. If my king is the king of justice in eternity, then he's the king of justice now. If you're not going to stand with me, then get out of the way.